only on average 10% of our athlete community gets access to endorsement deals. And that is because they are more well-known. They have an agency or an agent behind them. They perform better at the games. And so that, brands are, they have a higher social following, but the access wasn't democratized very well. And so we wanted to try and see if we could impact more athletes receiving more opportunities. That was happening. And that was a very big intent behind this platform.
You're listening to Sports Tech Feed, the global sports technology podcast.
Hello and welcome to Sports Tech Feed. I'm your host, Thomas Loams. Great to have you join us again this week. On today's show, we have Zaileen Janmohamed, Senior Vice President, Partnership Development and Innovation at the US Olympic and Paralympic Properties. Zaileen is a passionate leader with a wealth of holistic experience on the brand, agency and property sides of the sports marketing business. As the USOPP's Head of Partnership Development and Innovation, Zaileen works at the intersection of sales and partner management and activation, using market data to help evolve and innovate business strategy and opportunities for existing and future Team USA and LA28 partners. She also works closely with the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee to bring future-forward solutions to Team USA, athletes, and the movement as a whole. Most recently, Zaileen launched the Athlete Marketing Platform, a digital marketplace that houses athlete group marketing rights as well as directly connects athletes to brands for individual endorsement opportunities. Prior to the USOPP, Zaileen guided brands like Intel, Google, and Visa in sponsorship and experiential marketing opportunities as Senior Vice President of Client Consulting and Services at GMR Marketing. She also served as Head of Olympic Management at Visa, where she was responsible for delivering Visa's premier sports sponsorship on a global scale. Zaileen began her career as an account executive at Major League Soccer, so quite the breadth and the depth of experience across sports and sports marketing. So great to have her joining us on the show to talk about all of those efforts with the US Olympic and Paralympic Properties, not least among them the lead up to the Los Angeles 2028 Olympic Games. If you've enjoyed today's episode, then be sure to sign up to our newsletter, sportstechworldseries.com/newsletter. You will get updates on new episodes as they come out of Sports Tech Feed, and also really easy to digest weekly update every Thursday, just what's happening in the world of sports tech that you need to know, and really will help you get that competitive advantage in your role, whatever that may be. If you're unfamiliar with Sports Tech World Series, we're the world's largest global sports technology community, and a lot of our work and a lot of my day-to-day work is helping investors, sports tech vendors, and also sports properties, including leagues, federations, and national sporting organizations with consulting, advisory, and research work. So understanding what is the future of sports tech, how does their business or organization fit into that, and then how can they take advantage of all these innovations that are coming through on basically a daily basis to grow their bottom line and grow their fan base and really help their sport win both on and off the field. If you'd like to learn more about that, then feel free to reach out, Thomas Loams on LinkedIn, or you can also find our details on the website, sportstechworldseries.com. That's all from me for now. Over to Zaileen. Zaileen Janmohamed, SVP, Partnership Development and Innovation, Commercial for LA28. Welcome to Sports Tech Feed. Great to have you on the show.
Awesome, Thomas. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this chat.
So what role does innovation, it's obviously in your job title, what role does innovation play in preparation and delivery of the games?
Yeah, I think, let's start with just a broad strokes definition of innovation for me. I think when a lot of people think about the word innovation, they automatically jump to tech. It's a natural place to go. And I'm not saying that we don't think about that. We do. I think about it all the time, every day, almost every hour of every day. But I think the organization thinks about innovation in so many different ways. Innovation doesn't have to be from a tech perspective or a tech perspective only. We think about innovation as it relates to one of our core values, which is all around diversity. And when I say diversity, I mean it in representation, but I also mean it in diversity of thought, and diversity in thinking of how we do things differently, right? I think that's a really big focus for us. I think we have in LA28 or in Los Angeles, some history around the games, which is really powerful. That city embodies kind of the Olympic and Paralympic spirit. They've hosted the games a couple times already. They've done a magnificent job in doing that. But, in 2028, it'll be tens of years since the last games was hosted, and the world has changed and that city has changed. And so we think about everything from, how to be how to deliver more access to people of LA, and how did they get to the games or view the games in ways that maybe they weren't able to do before. We think about our athletes and what impact they will have as they lead up to those games, from now through 28, and then in 2028, when athletes of the world arrive, what does that experience look like? We look at it from a fan engagement perspective. We look at it from a community perspective. And so in all of those places, technology plays a part, but not the only part, right? It's about kind of thinking about access and engagement in just a different way completely.
Yeah. The way I think of it is innovation is just finding a better way to do something. And whether that's a process, whether that's a method, a product, or whatever that is, then that's how to do it. And we had from the Cleveland Cavaliers, they're the internal innovation team, and they talk about building a better mousetrap is from some of the literature, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with. And if you want to learn more about it, you can go back and listen to that episode. But it's always just incremental improvements across lots of different areas.
Yeah, you got it. I think, I spend a lot of time in front of a whiteboard, just kind of thinking through what are gaps that we face today. Where might there be opportunities, to your point, of like incrementally doing something better? And a lot of times, like, this is how tech works, right? In the startup world, you find a small gap of something that can be done a little bit better. And then the 2.0 and 4.0 and 5.0 version kind of expand on that gap and make it more efficient or more effective or more powerful, whatever that is. But usually the 1.0 version or the 0.5.0 version is just kind of capitalizing or leveraging on a small gap that has been found to better improve like a process, make a little bit more money, make things a little bit more efficient, right? And that's what we're trying to do across the entire ecosystem.
Well, what are some of the examples of, initiatives that you've launched across with the USOPC? What are some examples?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple that feel really basic, and then I'll talk about one that I think will hopefully have a lot of impact. The basic ones are about efficiency and communication and collaboration and productivity. I think, when a games comes to a host market, you have the NOC, so the National Olympic Committee, which which is what you just pointed out, which is the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee. Then you have the organizing committee, which is LA28. And then you have this middle entity, which is responsible for the commercialization of all of the efforts across both of those properties. And so you all of a sudden go from one property to three, plus all of the athletes and the national governing bodies that are responsible for the Olympic movement in a country. And you can imagine, if that's not structured properly, how convoluted those processes can become. And so, really simple things of like how we use intercompany communication tools like Slack or other things, how we use video conferencing, what are the dashboards and tools that from a process and flow management, workflow management that we use internally. Those are all, I think, things that we have to do now because of the fact that there's three entities, but we want to do because it makes our work better and makes us more efficient. And so those are some of the things that we've already used. I think the IT teams across all of those entities continue to work on ways that improve our collaboration and productivity. For those of you who are not aware, right, LA28 itself, right now we're at about 100 people. We are like the craziest startup that you will ever encounter, right? We're at 100. We will scale to 5,700 by the time 2028 comes along. We will launch a product, which will be the games, and then we go away. And so it's a really crazy product life cycle if you think about it from a traditional startup perspective, in the ways that you need to scale and how you use technology to help you do that. And then the fact that you actually have to offboard 5,000 people plus, and kind of manage all of that information transfer back to the USOPC or to the IOC or to the athletes or whoever that information needs to go to. So you can just imagine kind of the tech processes and the tech stack that needs to be built to allow for that. And then what happens kind of at the end of that journey. So lots of work happening right now, and we're working right now to figure out what that tech stack looks like. There's a ton of conversations in the marketplace right now, because you can imagine, your traditional technology companies, I don't want to use the word salivate, but they're interested. Like, this is a really interesting use case to be a part of, to help start to scale and build and be a part of the games. The one place which is a really great use case to talk about, what we've done to date is this thing that we've called the Athlete Marketing Platform, or AMP. We introduced AMP in November to the wider community. There was a lot of press about it, and we actually just launched the technology itself last week. But basically what it is a digital marketplace, a closed loop digital marketplace that connects athletes to brands. And think about any digital marketplace that you use today. Think about Uber, right? Think about the app you use on your phone when you're connecting supply and demand. So supply is drivers, demand is riders, and you're connecting this in like a closed loop system. This is essentially the exact same thing. You're connecting supply of athletes who, frankly, many of whom do not earn a lot of money. 60% of our athletes earn less than $25,000 a year. And they just don't have access to endorsement opportunities like the top 10% do. And you have demand from brands who are looking for athletes to help tell stories, to help engage consumers, and to help drive awareness of their products and services, right? There was only a few ways for those brands to find those athletes, either through a search, an internet search, or because they knew a couple of agents, or because they knew athletes. And so what we're trying to do is put these two kind of constituent groups together in a very direct way, using technology to help them stay connected and to facilitate all of the pain points that drive people crazy, like contracts, like payments, like chat features. And so now, right, what this technology allows brands to do is it allows a brand to go into this platform to search for an athlete based on location. So if I need an athlete in San Francisco on a particular day or within a particular week that likes vegetarian food, I can search for that now. And you'll get kind of a filtered list of athletes, and you can see, okay, here's what their social following looks like. Here's a really compelling story about them. You can chat with them using this platform. The athletes have it on their mobile devices, so they can actually do this in a way that actually makes sense for them versus trying to find a place in their training schedules to be online. And you can do a deal really quickly. And so it allows brands kind of turnkey access to athletes. It allows for activation at scale. And it allows for athletes to make a little bit more money, which is basically the intent from the very beginning. And so, we have built this technology with a vendor and a partner who knows this space really well. We have, to your point, like, there was technology that exists in the marketplace today that already does this, and incrementally we tried to change it so that it better suited our athletes and our ecosystem. And I have a feeling, Thomas, that we're piloting it now. In a year, if you and I talked, it's going to look completely different than what it is today, because we're going to learn from this pilot, right? We're going to know what just didn't work very well, what broke, and we'll try to fix it and make it more efficient. But these are the types of things that we want to do that allow for an evolution of the Olympic and Paralympic ecosystem. And if we can do it for the city of Los Angeles, for the Olympic movement as a whole, for the world, great. That's the goal. That's the endeavor.
And so who's the platform open to on both sides of the as you said, a two-sided marketplace? So is it all US Olympic and Paralympic athletes can jump on the platform? And then in terms of brands, is there a special vetting process, or is it fairly open? Obviously, if they fit within the values of the Olympic, movement, but is it fairly open for brands coming in the other side?
Yeah. So on the brand side, it's open to any brand that's a Team USA sponsor. So that includes domestic sponsors that have just the US Olympic and Paralympic rights, and also includes the top sponsors that are IOC sponsors that also have domestic rights. So anybody who's a partner gets access to the system. And then on the athlete side, it's open to right now 1,600 athletes. And these are athletes who have either been at a games before or are considered Olympic and Paralympic hopefuls. So they have podiumed at world championships and so on and so forth. And that is for that 1600 is for right now. I think in a month or two, if we feel like the technology is working and we've kind of worked out all the bugs, that 1600 will increase. We're like, now that the technology is there is no limit to how many people you can actually put in the system. Yeah. And so the thought is to actually allow for all people that that are considered under the Team USA umbrella, which includes probably another 1,500 athletes on top of that to be invited into the system. And then, the product roadmap actually has us including Olympic and Paralympic legends and alumni, right? So people who are no longer competing, but frankly, brands want access to as well and have them on the platform as well. So, I think in the pilot phase, we're just, we're confident, but also holding our breath here to make sure everything is working and not buggy. But the thought is to open it up. I think even on the commercial side, on the brand side, my hope is that this opens up to NGB sponsors, further down the road, or that it's leveraged by other national Olympic and Paralympic committees. Like, this is technology that I think can serve globally once we kind of figure out, the best and most efficient way for it to work here.
Yeah. And who are you using as your tech partner for that?
Yeah, this is a company called Open Doors. And so Open Doors has a great tech platform already that connects brands to athletes. They have an open system. So ours is a closed loop system, right? Only our sponsors and our athletes are on it. But they have an open system where any athlete can connect with any brand who has access to it to do deals mainly around social. Yeah. Our features on top of that. So number one, it's closed. Number two, it includes other use cases outside of social. So our athletes do a lot of appearances. They do a lot of production shoots. They do things that are in addition to social media endorsements. And so we've built the technology on top of that to allow for that. And then we've also added the functionality for our brands to have access to group marketing. So think of any professional sports league in the US that has this concept of GLA or group licensing rights, where a brand can put together 3, 4, 5 athletes in a creative campaign and be able to use those athletes and their IP and represent the team, right? So in our case, it would be a rule of 3. So 3 athletes coming together from 3 different NGBs representing Team USA. And the tech functionality is going to be built into the platform so that you can pick those athletes in the technology, route your creative, and then go off into the market, in a much more turnkey fashion than you would be able to do otherwise. So those are incremental features that we've put into our tech platform on top of what Open Doors already offers in the outside market.
Yeah, and I imagine from Open Doors side, obviously they're quite active in preparing for name, image, likeness changes. And obviously California is a kind of leader in I say obviously for people that don't know, and maybe internationally, just taking a slight detour, name, image, likeness is basically for college athletes within the US being able to earn money from their name, image, and likeness. That can be appearing at, say, like a sports camp, or appearing at, a shopping center, up to using your image in a video game. So currently that's not allowed. It's changing. The NCAA said it's going to change, and then the California governor last year signed into law something that comes into effect in a few years. So it's still kind of down the track, but basically requiring athletes to be able to make money from their name, image, and likeness. So there's a lot of people in the space that are getting ready for it to change. It's not quite there yet, but so it's interesting to see that maybe some of the parallels between this, that you would have your superstars that will have no issue getting endorsements, no issue getting, if anything, they're picking and choosing, and especially if they have big agencies kind of working behind them. But you're in the beach volleyball team, or you're in, the winter sport, like the toboggan. Is it a toboggan? No, the skeleton, sorry. Toboggan's what little kids do. Skeleton's a little bit more dangerous. Yes. But, insert sport there. You might have a fantastic following in your community and in your sport, but you don't have that kind of reach or even connection. So I think it's a great initiative to really broaden that out across the entire team, because it's a big team. I mean, when you think about the Olympic movement and why it's so unique is the amount of sports that are played, the amount of different walks of life, different backgrounds, different everything that come together for it is very impressive.
Yep. I think two things were or are happening, and this is what we were looking at as we came up with the concept for AMP, right? The one is currently happening, which is, only on average 10% of our athlete community gets access to endorsement deals. And that is because they are more well-known, they have an agency or an agent behind them, they perform better at the games. And so that, brands are, they have a higher social following, but the access wasn't democratized very well. And so we wanted to try and see if we could impact more athletes receiving more opportunities. That was happening, and that was a very big intent behind this platform. The other was what we saw the potential of happening in the future, which is NIL, which is what you're talking about, right, Thomas? Which, theoretically, either if this goes state by state or if the NC2A does a broad scale change, we will move from, and these are on average numbers, right? We will move in the US from having around 10,000 athletes, all inclusive, Olympic, professional sports, 10,000 athletes available for endorsement opportunities to 500,000, right? If you take out all the college athletes that are out there. And so when we saw that, when we were looking kind of in our glass ball looking forward, we were like, man, if that's going to happen, how do we make it easier for the Olympic and Paralympic athletes to get access to those deals? Because if all of a sudden, if supply is going to quadruple or exponentially increase, right? You want to make sure that your athletes are going to have at least a spot at the front of the line, if possible, to get access to those deals. And so I would say that both of those considerations were sitting in our head. Like, what is happening today that we need to try and help? And what could happen tomorrow, so that, and how do we protect our athletes in that evolution, which is the right evolution, by the way, but how do we make sure that our athletes are receiving opportunities in that use case and in that scenario?
And obviously the collegiate system is a huge talent incubator for Olympic sports, is the other thing to point out. So it's not, with the exception of something like basketball, obviously you have the NBA, you have, everything has their world championships, has their highest level of competition. And the Olympics sits above all of that. But for most of these sports, it is coming and playing and performing at college, which is where they will go from there into the Olympic team. Which is different to a lot of other countries. Australia as well. That's not really, there's a university level competition, but it's a bit more of a party than it is a performance. Having represented my university at several different sports, including lawn bowls, which, so that's the kind of, and water polo, it's just all over the shop. But if you're moving into it, you're looking at that as genuine talent incubation, but also incubation for their brand, because that's one of the most pivotal kind of key areas for pivotal moments for building that personal brand, and to be able to transition that then into the Olympic movement makes a lot of sense.
Yep, I agree. I think in the United States, for sure, the NCAA and college athletics is our biggest training ground for people who then come into Team USA, especially on the Olympic side. I think on the Paralympic side, the incubation and the training and feeder systems are a little bit different. And we talk about that all the time, and, not to completely digress, but, what has happened in the US this last year with COVID, and the cancellation of seasons from the college athletic perspective, like, we think about that. That is important to us, because we know that when they lose a season in college athletics, that impacts what Team USA could look like in 4 years or 8 years in LA. And so, those are the types of things that we are monitoring quite a bit, both from an on-field performance perspective, and then for sure from a, how are these athletes able to take care of themselves? What does their financial stability look like? How do we make sure that they can focus on their training and not have to focus on all of the other things of, like, how am I going to make money? Where's my next meal coming from? How do I support my family? So it takes kind of the entire perspective to make sure that you're taking care of the team today and also preparing for what the team might face in the future.
Well, following on from that, so what are we, 7 years away from LA28? How do you future-proof for that? How do you, with technology developing so rapidly, I know we said that it's innovation first and then tech is a solution that underpins that. But even so, I mean, if we rewind the clock 7 years ago, where we are today, not many people have predicted that. And that is probably true of anyone working in technology, is predictions aren't that great. But how do you try to at least get as close to the bullseye in terms of what's happening with tech over the next 7 years?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, and one that we grapple with every day. And I'm going to give you two answers. The first is, we have a lot of conversations. We do a lot of like listening and learning to try and get smarter on where we think certain categories or certain technology is going to go. We do that in our own analysis. Like, that's part of my job, is to do a lot of reading and a lot of learning to make sure I understand, like, what is the trend in AI, or, you know, how does enterprise security going to change from now, you know, through to 2028. And so some of that is, you know, internal reading and analysis, working with people within the team. A lot of it is external conversations with technology companies themselves, with the VC community, with different types of analysts. You know, one of our partners is Deloitte. You know, they give us a lot of tech consulting as well, of like, you know, what does their expertise tell us about what's going to happen in the future? So a lot of conversations and a lot of learning that we try to just stay on top of. That's answer number one. Answer number two, Thomas, is a little bit more ambiguous, which is, I have a bet with my boss that the way we do sponsorships today, from a very traditional category exclusivity perspective, is going to change, because A, we don't know what technology is going to exist in 8 years, and B, so many of the technology companies that we know about today already overlap in the products and services that they offer. And so it's going to be really hard to say, you get ERP, you get cybersecurity, you get search, and you get collaboration. Like, I think that whole thing is going to blow. I could be wrong, but that's my hypothesis, is that it's going to completely blow up. And so, you know, with that in my head, I think the way that we try to solve for that today is, rather than think about the specific product that we might need, we try to think about the use case. And so I kind of have an idea of like, what are the use cases that we need to solve in LA or leading up to LA? We need to solve a frictionless experience use case. We need to solve a cybersecurity use case. We need to solve an ingress egress use case. Like, there are use cases that we need to solve a crowd control use case. Like, there are definitely use cases that I know are going to be problems that need to be solved, you know, 5 years from now, 7 years from now, at the games, whatever it is. And I want partners with me that are proficient or experts in solving that particular use case, and have a vision for what that use case might look like in the future. What the product is, that might change. We may use something completely different to solve for that in the future. That's okay. I just want the partner that's best in class to be able to help me figure out what that solution might be in 7 years. We signed a deal last year with Delta, and they became our first founding partner. And Thomas, like, you think of Delta and you think of planes and how you travel today. The conversations we had with Delta, as we were in those negotiations, were around what you think about, but also like flying cars, right? Like, it's not even just traditional tech companies that we're thinking about. It's every single company that we talk to has an innovation element that they're saying, okay, in 7 years, we think that people will not only get around by plane or by Uber or by bicycle, there's going to be a flying car component. And so how do we think about that? What is LA going to look like? How do we build that into our contract? And what potentially could be the use case? You know, is it VIP hospitality? Is it a venue that maybe isn't as close? What are the use cases by which, you know, this type of technology will be necessary? I will say that all of the conversations are super interesting. I come home, my husband's in the tech field, and I come home and I'm like, oh my God, like, what is going to happen in like 7
Honey,
years?
we're getting flying cars. It's happening.
Yeah, when are we buying our flying car?
Yeah.
It's really crazy, but also really awesome at the potential of like what these games could be like in 7 or 8 years, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, I'm less on the flying car side. I think that's honestly the example I use when people are like, "What's the future going to look like? Flying cars." We've been saying that since the Jetsons, like since the '60s. I think it probably is going to be there, but it might be a VIP thing. I don't think I'm going to be the one that's getting around that. But thinking about autonomous vehicles, so autonomous vehicles that go there and then you don't want to pay for parking, so you send your autonomous vehicle home. Are we going to have traffic jams both ways? Peak hour constantly, like all of those things. Like it's more ride sharing stuff. Like what's going to change? And again, there's as you said, there's tech elements to it, but there's also just cultural, societal changes that will happen as well. And I think coronavirus, COVID last year is a prime example of that, about what people are willing to adapt to and change with rather. And certainly something like that just accelerates and changes things so quickly. Like who knows what's going to happen between now and 7 years. But as you said, it's just who can help us with this, who can make those changes. So, I guess following on from that, what's the legacy the games are going to leave to the city and I guess sports innovation, sports technology community there? Because obviously they're a fantastic use case for technology, innovation, all that kind of stuff, especially if you just think of a stadium as just this amazing little test bed for all the kind of cutting edge things that happen and the interactions of people and all that kind of stuff. What's it going to look like, or what do you hope it looks like once you scale back down from the 5,700 back down to zero?
Yeah, we talk a lot about this internally within the organizing committee, and it starts with our chairperson. Casey Wasserman tells us this all the time. He says, if we just deliver a great games from an operational perspective, we will have failed. And what he means by that is, first of all, we have 7 or 8 years when we first started to actually put these games on. And that's more than any other organizing committee has had because the IOC awarded the 2 games at once. And so we have more time. And we're doing these games in a city that is probably one of the best cities in the world from a sports and entertainment perspective in terms of venues, right? You have amazing, great venues that have been recently built or will be built by the time 28 happens. And so a lot of the emphasis from other organizing committees is on venue infrastructure and the build, and we don't have to do a lot of that.
Yeah.
And so, we think about a lot then, if we don't, if that is table stakes for us, what are we doing on top of that to actually show innovation and leave a legacy for the games, for the city of LA, for our athletes, and for the fans who actually engage. And I think, we're thinking about that in a couple of different ways. I think, with our partners, legacy to us means facing and dealing with and implementing solutions for issues that exist in this country that need a little bit of push and maybe need the power of the Olympics and Paralympics behind it to actually get some things done. And so when I talk about these purpose-driven platforms, I'm talking about things like climate change, and I'm talking about disability inclusivity, and I'm talking about gender equality, and I'm talking about our education system, and I'm talking about arts and culture. So, there are some things that we are working on, and youth sport for that matter, right? Like, how do we get more kids to play? So there are, call it, 10 to 12 themes that we look at, and we look at our partners with and say, okay, which of these are really important to you as well, and how do we actually move the needle in creating some impact? And that could be in LA, it could be in the country, or it could be in the world, right? Yeah. With Delta, we really focused on their aspect of volunteerism. We know we need a big volunteer contingent for LA, but how does volunteerism exist in every part of your daily life, not just when, you know, the games happen, and what is the impact to your communities as you do that? So that was an initiative that we're really working on with Delta. With Comcast, we're thinking about disability inclusivity, knowing that, you know, 30% of Americans live with some sort of disability. But when you look at media and advertising, you don't actually see that that representation doesn't exist. And so how do we actually move the needle from that perspective? So there's a lot of things from a platform perspective that we're hoping to do in order to leave a legacy. We call these, like, what are the flags we want to plant such that when we leave, those things are still going. And that doesn't mean, Thomas, that we do them in 28. That means we do them now. And we're thinking about climate change now. We're building wind farms now so that they help us through the games, but they also exist when we all go. The other thing that we think about is really specifically, what does the experience look like for the fans that attend in LA, or the fans that consume the games outside of LA? And what is the legacy on the industry, on the sports and entertainment industry, by which we do that? And so, you know, if that means that, you know, fans who are not in LA experience the games from a digital, virtual, AR perspective like they've never done before, that's great for the games. It's great for the movement. It's also great for the industry if we can figure that piece out. That's a really big intent of ours, is to make sure that fans from all over the world are experiencing the games exactly the same, if possible, as the fans who are actually able to attend. And similarly for, you know, the city of LA and the fans that go through, the fans and the athletes that are going through that city, like, how do we use LA and potentially evolve the infrastructure of that city such that, you know, not to use the word that's been overused, which is smart city, but such that, you know, LA becomes kind of an example city of what the future of cities actually look like, right? And that's where a lot of our tech partners are really interested, because LA, you know, has a diverse ecosystem, you know, kind of encompasses a whole different set of communities all in one city, but also has, you know, infrastructure things that they're dealing with, and a model by which we think we can actually make an impact. And if we can do it in LA, we're hoping that we can do it either in other Olympic and Paralympic cities, but also in cities that are not hosting anything, but just need a little bit of evolution on how the city functions.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly something in LA, just as a mega city. I'm not sure what the actual technical term is, but, you know, just the scale, size, everything else. But that also means what's happening there, as you mentioned, the kind of the sports and the entertainment communities that are there working hand in hand and producing some really cool stuff. So yeah, excited to see what happens over the next 7 years and see some outcomes from it. And as you said, hopefully really put those flags in the ground for some of those broader cultural, societal issues, which again is what the Olympics is about, and trying to push that side of it. So great. Well, thank you so much, Zaileen. Just before you go, final question for you. What is your favorite sporting moment of all time?
Oh, this one's easy. So Thomas, I'm born and raised Canadian. So mine of all time is in 2010 in Vancouver, which is my home city, when Sidney Crosby scored the game-winning goal in overtime against the US. I was there at that game. I did a cartwheel and hugged my dad, who was also at the game. I was sitting with my colleagues at Visa, most of whom were American, so I got to do a lot of trash talking as well. It is one that I will remember for the rest of my life. I have a picture of it outside in my office as well. I look at it every single day.
Fantastic. All right, that's so good. I think that's probably the fastest answer we've ever had to that question. So it's right on it, you know.
I knew it. It was easy for me.
It's great. Undercover Canadian as well.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Zaileen. I really enjoyed chatting to you. Appreciate your time. And as I said, kind of looking forward to following over the next 7 years and experiencing the games, hopefully in person as well. Get my flying car there. And yeah, just make the most of what really promises to be a fantastic Olympic event.
Awesome. Nice talking to you, Thomas. Thank you for having me, and keep in touch. Like, I'm sure we'll have updates along the way, so it'd be good to catch up.
There you have it. That is Zaileen Janmohamed, SVP, Partnership Development Innovation at the US Olympic and Paralympic Properties. Really unique role, as I said, kind of dealing with such a long timeline to delivering up to the games in 2028, scaling up and then scaling back down. So they're doing some really interesting stuff, especially around that athlete marketing platform, the AMP. So interested to see how it works and develops over the next few years. And hoping some of those innovations can be kind of taken forwards and get that institutional knowledge feeding back into Team USA over the next few years. Thanks again for joining us. I'm your host, Thomas Loams. We'll see you next time on Sports Tech Feed, the Global Sports Technology Podcast.